I was 24, staring at my bank app at work when my mother calmly stated over the phone that the money was gone, not hacked, not frozen, withdrawn in cash, to my brother, for his new car. I remember the phone turning to ice in my hand while she explained it like a minor family errand. A month before my closing day, 4 years of freezing, the house deposit I had bled for, handed to Leo so his fragile ego could heal. Just like that. They expected me to nod. They expected me to keep the peace. What I did instead is the reason you're watching this. A month later, the shiny new sports car they stole my future for was crushed to pieces. But that was only the beginning. The real reckoning took 10 years, and it found all of us at a luxury gala none of them saw coming. If a family ever asked you to burn your own future to keep a golden child warm, stay with me. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. It was November 12, 2016. The heater was broken again, so I sat on my cheap mattress wrapped in 2 thick blankets, staring at the bright screen of my laptop. I was 24 years old, working as an entry-level financial analyst at Pacific Freight, a mid-sized logistics company in Portland. I made $48,000 a year. After taxes, it wasn't a lot, but I was careful, extremely careful. I lived on $1,200 a month. My rent was $750 for this dark, damp studio. I spent $200 on groceries, mostly eating rice, beans, and frozen chicken. I didn't buy coffee from cafes. I didn't buy new clothes. Every single extra dollar went into my savings. On my laptop screen was an Excel file named freedom.xsl. I updated it every Friday night. I scrolled down to the bottom row and looked at the final number, $42,850. I smiled. My chest felt a little lighter. I was saving for a 20% down payment on a modest townhouse in Hillsborough. The target was $45,000. Just a few more months of tight budgets, and I would finally have my own home. A place where the heating actually worked. A place that belonged only to me. The money sat in a joint checking and savings account at Oregon Community Bank. The account number ended in 4402. My mother, Susan, was the secondary name on the account. We opened it together when I was 16 and got my first part-time job at a local grocery store. Back then, as a minor, I needed a parent to co-sign. Over the years, I just kept using it. The account had no monthly fees, and whenever I asked my mother to come to the bank with me to remove her name, she always found an excuse. "Oh, Clara, I don't have time this week," she would say, waving her hand. "Besides, it's good to have my name on it for emergencies. What if you get into an accident and someone needs to pay your hospital bills? You worry too much." I trusted her. She was my mother. In my mind, it was my money, and her name was just a legal technicality on a piece of paper. The next evening, Sunday, November 13th, I drove my beat-up 2008 Honda Civic to my parents' house for our mandatory family dinner. They lived in Lake Oswego, a wealthy suburb. Pulling into their wide, perfectly paved driveway, I parked my faded gray car next to my father's polished SUV. Their large 4-bedroom house looked like a picture from a magazine. The lawn was perfectly cut. The front porch lights gave off a warm, welcoming glow. To the outside world, the Hayes family was flawless. My father, Robert, was a retired regional manager for a retail chain. My mother was a respected high school history teacher. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted garlic, butter, and expensive vanilla candles. The heat was on high, instantly warming my frozen hands. "Clara, is that you? Take your shoes off. I just mopped the hardwood," my mother called out from the kitchen. I slipped off my wet boots and walked into the dining room. My father was sitting at the head of the long oak table, reading a golf magazine. He didn't look up. "Hi, Dad," I said quietly. He just grunted in response, turning a page. A few minutes later, heavy footsteps came down the carpeted stairs. It was my younger brother, Leo. He was 22, tall, and wearing brand new white Nike sneakers that easily cost $200. Leo had just quit his job at a local car dealership. He only worked there for 3 weeks. Before that, he worked at a gym for a month before getting fired for showing up late too many times. "Something smells amazing," Leo said, dropping into the chair next to my father. My father finally put his magazine down and smiled warmly. "How is my boy doing today? Did you look at those real estate courses I sent you?" "Yeah, Dad. I looked at them," Leo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. The instructor seems like a complete idiot. I feel like I'd just be wasting my time. I need something that actually challenges my brain, you know?" "Exactly," my father agreed, nodding seriously. "You have an entrepreneur's brain, Leo. You can't be caged by small-minded bosses or boring classroom teachers. You just haven't found the right fit yet. You shouldn't settle." My mother walked in carrying a large platter of roasted chicken and vegetables. She placed it in the center of the table with a bright smile. Your father is right, Leo. You have so much potential. You just need a little time to figure things out. Eat up, honey, you look thin. We all started serving our plates. The clinking of silver forks against porcelain plates echoed in the room. I took a small piece of chicken and a scoop of carrots. So, Clara, my mother said without looking at me, busy pouring gravy over Leo's potatoes. How is the typing job? I'm a financial analyst, Mom, I said softly, keeping my eyes on my plate. It's actually going really well. Last week I caught a huge billing error in our system. I saved the company about $15,000. My manager said I might be up for a promotion by— That's nice, Clara, my mother interrupted smoothly, passing the salt to my father. Can you pass the rolls? Leo, did you hear that the Henderson boy got a new sports car? Such a show-off. I closed my mouth. I swallowed the food, though it suddenly tasted like cardboard. I looked down at the sleeves of my 3-year-old sweater. It was worn out at the elbows. I worked 60 hours a week, and my achievements were just background noise to them. After dinner, my mother asked me to help her clean up. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands deep in warm, soapy water, scrubbing the roasting pan. My mother stood next to me, drying some glasses with a clean towel. Clara, she said, lowering her voice so the men in the dining room wouldn't hear. Leo is going through a very hard time right now. He feels a little lost. He just needs to keep a job, Mom, I said gently, scrubbing the metal pan. Any job. My mother sighed, shaking her head. You don't understand his pressures. You have everything figured out. You sit at your little desk all day, and it's easy for you. Leo is different. He's sensitive. I just want to ask you, try not to show off so much about your work in front of him, okay? It hurts his confidence. I stopped scrubbing. I looked at my soapy hands. Showing off? I was just answering her question, but I didn't argue. Arguing with her was like talking to a brick wall. It only ended in her crying and my father yelling at me for upsetting her. Okay, Mom, I whispered. I'm sorry. Thank you, sweetie, she smiled, patting my shoulder. You're a good girl. An hour later, I drove back to my dark, freezing apartment in Beaverton. The rain was falling harder now. I got into bed, pulled the blankets up to my chin, and opened my banking app on my phone, just to look at the number one last time before falling asleep. $42,850. It was my safety. It was my future. It was the proof that I mattered, even if nobody else saw it. I closed my eyes and fell asleep, completely unaware that when the sun came up the next morning, my entire world would be shattered. Monday morning, November 14, 2016. The office at Pacific Freight was quiet, filled only with the clicking of keyboards and the low hum of the large copy machine. It was 11:30 a.m. I sat at my small gray desk, taking a quick 5-minute break from staring at shipping invoices. I had received a $50 rebate check in the mail from my internet provider over the weekend. I opened my bank's mobile app on my phone to deposit it. I typed in my password. The screen loaded. Available balance, $350 and it's. I stopped breathing. My eyes moved to the top left corner of the screen, checking if I had somehow logged into the wrong account. No. It was my account, ending in 4402. I quickly tapped the screen, pulling up the recent transactions. Right at the top, dated today at 9:15 a.m., was a single line of text. In-branch withdrawal, cashier's check, Lake Oswego branch, $42,500 in zeros. My hands started to shake. The phone felt like a block of ice in my palm. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. This was a mistake, a bank error. Someone stole my card information. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the customer service number for Oregon Community Bank. The automated voice took 3 long minutes before connecting me to a real person. Oregon Community Bank, my name is Linda. How can I help you today? Hi, yes please, I said. My voice was tight and shaking. There is a massive mistake on my account. All my savings are gone. It says $42,000 was withdrawn this morning. I didn't do this. You have to freeze the account and stop the check. I understand your concern, ma'am, Linda said calmly. Let me pull up your file. Can you verify your account number and security PIN? I gave her the numbers. The silence on the phone lasted for 30 seconds. It felt like 10 years. All right, Clara, Linda finally said. I am looking at the transaction. It was not a fraudulent charge. The withdrawal was made in person at our Lake Oswego branch at 9:15 a.m. The teller verified the ID of the person making the withdrawal. Who? I begged, standing up from my chair. Who was it? It was the secondary account holder, Linda said softly. Susan Hayes. Your mother. I froze. No. That's my money. That's my paycheck deposits for 4 years. She can't just take it. Ma'am, I am so sorry. Linda's voice was sympathetic but firm. Your mother signed the withdrawal form and claimed the transfer was for a family emergency. And because this is a joint checking and savings account, both names on the account have equal and full legal rights to the funds. Legally, she does not need your permission to make a withdrawal. There is no fraud claim we can file here. I dropped the phone. It hit the desk with a loud clatter. I didn't even hang up. I grabbed my car keys, put on my worn-out coat, and walked straight out of the office. I didn't tell my manager. I couldn't speak. The 30-minute drive to Lake Oswego was a blur. The sky was heavy and gray, matching the heavy dead feeling in my chest. When I turned onto my parents' quiet, tree-lined street, I saw it immediately. Parked right in the middle of their perfect driveway was a brand-new, bright blue 2016 Ford Mustang GT. It was spotless, shining even under the cloudy sky. It had paper dealer plates on the back that said Westside Motors. I parked my old Honda on the street. My legs felt like jelly as I walked up the driveway. As I got closer, the front door opened. My mother walked out, holding a smartphone, laughing. Behind her was Leo, tossing a set of shiny car keys in the air and catching them. My father stood on the porch, holding a mug of coffee, looking at the car with a proud smile. Okay, Leo, go stand by the hood. Let me take a picture for Facebook, my mother said, lifting her phone. Mom, I said, my voice cracked. They all stopped and looked at me. Nobody looked guilty. Nobody looked ashamed. My mother just lowered her phone, looking mildly annoyed that I had ruined her photo. Clara, what are you doing here in the middle of the day? My father asked, taking a sip of his coffee. Did you lose your job? Where is my money? I asked. I didn't yell. I didn't have the energy to yell. My whole body felt hollow. My mother sighed, rolling her eyes just a little bit. She walked down the porch steps and stood in front of me. Clara, lower your voice. The neighbors have their windows open. You went to the bank this morning, I said, pointing a shaking finger at the blue sports car. You took $42,000, my house money. It's not your money, Clara, my mother said smoothly, her voice calm and reasonable. It is a joint family account. We opened it together. And right now, the family needed it. Needed it? I whispered, staring at the sports car. For a Mustang? Leo shifted uncomfortably, leaning against the side of his new car. Look, Clara, Mom said you had extra cash just sitting there doing nothing. I really need a reliable car for my real estate networking. I have to look successful to be successful. You know how it is. He was getting so depressed, Clara, my mother added, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back, away from her hand. He has been struggling so much with his confidence. Look at him now. He finally has his spark back. A new car was exactly the confidence boost he needed to get his career started. That was 4 years of my life, I said, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. 4 years of freezing in my apartment. 4 years of eating rice and beans. That was my home. My father stepped off the porch, his face turning hard and angry. Stop being so dramatic and selfish, Clara. You are a single girl. You don't need a whole house right now. You have a good job. You can just save it back up in a year or two. Your brother needed help today. Family helps family. I saved that money, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Every single dollar was from my paycheck. And who paid for your food when you were a child? My father snapped, pointing his finger at me. Who put a roof over your head for 18 years? We did. We never charged you a penny. And now, when your brother needs a little help, you come here throwing a temper tantrum like a spoiled child. My mother put her hands on her hips. Honestly, Clara, I thought we raised you to be a kinder person. I am very disappointed in how greedy you are acting right now. I looked at my mother, then at my father, then at Leo, who was quietly running his hand over the smooth blue paint of the car, completely ignoring my pain. They weren't sorry. They didn't think they did anything wrong. In their minds, my pain, my sacrifices, and my future meant absolutely nothing compared to a simple smile on Leo's face. A sharp, painful truth hit my chest. I didn't have a family. I never did. To them, I was just a tool to be used. A bank to be robbed. The last bit of hope I had for my parents died right there on that driveway. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't cry. I turned around without saying another word, walked back to my old faded car and got in. I locked the doors, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them standing behind me in their perfect fake world. I drove straight from their perfect driveway in Lake Oswego to my local bank branch in Beaverton. I didn't cry on the way. My eyes were completely dry. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a thick leather belt around my ribs and pulled it tight. making it hard to take a full breath. I parked outside the bank, turned off the engine, and walked inside. The bank lobby was bright and smelled like strong coffee and floor cleaner. I walked up to a teller, a young woman with a polite smile. "I need to close a joint account," I said. My voice was completely flat. It didn't even sound like my own voice. "Or, at least I need my name removed from it permanently, today." The teller asked for my ID. She clicked her mouse a few times. "Okay, Clara, I see the account here. It has a balance of $350. To remove your name, we will need to withdraw the remaining funds and close your access. The primary account holder will be notified by mail." "Do it," I said. She printed a piece of paper and handed me a pen. I signed my name. She counted out $300 bills and a 50, sliding them across the smooth counter. The physical cash looked so small, 4 years of my life, reduced to 3 thin pieces of paper. "You are completely removed from the account, Clara," the teller said gently. "Is there anything else?" "No," I whispered. "That's all." I walked back to my car. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a heavy dark gray. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the $350 in my hand. I needed to talk to someone. I needed someone in my family to tell me that I wasn't crazy, that what happened today was wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed Aunt Martha. She was my father's older sister. Growing up, she was the nice aunt. She always brought me small gifts and listened to me when my parents ignored me. If anyone in the family had a sense of right and wrong, it was Martha. She answered on the third ring. "Clara, hello, sweetie. I am just putting some cookies in the oven. How are you?" "Aunt Martha," I said, my voice finally cracking just a little. "Did Dad tell you what happened this morning?" There was a long, heavy pause on the phone. The warm, happy tone in her voice vanished. "He called me about an hour ago," Martha said quietly. Her voice was careful now, measured. "He said you were very upset about the car. He stole my house money, Aunt Martha," I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Mom went to the bank and took $42,000 out of my savings account. Every penny I saved for my own home. They bought Leo a Mustang." Another long silence. I could hear the faint sound of her oven door closing in the background. "Clara, listen to me," Martha said, lowering her voice like she was afraid someone was listening. "Your father is a very proud man. He cares deeply about how the family looks. Leo has been struggling, and your parents just wanted to help him stand on his own 2 feet. With my money?" I asked. The betrayal stung like a fresh cut. Martha sighed heavily. "Your father told me it was family money. He said you were living alone and didn't really need a house right now." "Clara, please don't make a big scene out of this. You know how your father gets when he is angry. It will just tear the family apart. You are young. You have a good job. Just let it go, sweetie. Keep the peace. We have Thanksgiving dinner next week, and I don't want everyone fighting." I stared out the windshield at the wet parking lot. Keep the peace. That was the rule of the family. My father could do whatever he wanted, my brother got whatever he wanted, and the rest of the family just looked away, too scared of my father's anger to ever speak the truth. My aunt knew it was wrong, but her comfort and a quiet Thanksgiving dinner were more important to her than my future. "I won't be at Thanksgiving, Aunt Martha," I said quietly. Before she could say another word, I hung up the phone. I blocked her number. Then, I opened my contacts and blocked my mother, my father, and Leo. I put the phone down on the passenger seat. The last bit of the naive, hopeful girl inside me died in that cold car. Crying wasn't going to bring my money back. Begging them to love me wasn't going to change who they were. I drove back to my dark apartment in Beaverton. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my coat. I sat down at my small desk and opened my laptop. I opened my freedom.xl cell file. I highlighted the cell that said $42,850. I pressed the delete key. The cell went blank. The total changed to 0. I stared at the screen. The financial analyst inside my brain, the part of me that looked at numbers, patterns, and logic all day for a living, suddenly woke up. Something about this entire situation did not make sense. My father was a retired regional manager. My mother was a senior teacher. They lived in a house worth almost $1 million. They drove nice cars. They wore nice clothes. If Leo desperately needed a $40,000 car to boost his ego, why did my parents steal my money? Why didn't my father just write a check? Why didn't they just go to the car dealership and finance the car with their own excellent credit? People with real money don't steal from their daughter's savings account. I minimized my Excel sheet and opened a web browser. Every county in Oregon has a public property tax and records database. Because of my job at Pacific Freight, I knew exactly how to look up financial backgrounds and property deeds to verify our shipping clients. I typed in the website for Clackamas County Public Records. I entered my parents' home address in Lake Oswego. The search results loaded on my screen. I clicked on the most recent property deed history. I started reading through the legal documents, my eyes moving quickly across the dates and amounts. My heart started to beat faster. 3 years ago, my parents took out a massive home equity line of credit. They borrowed heavily against the house. But that wasn't all. I scrolled down to the county tax records. There was a red flag on their file, a tax lien. They owed the state of Oregon over $60,000 in unpaid property taxes, going back 3 years. I clicked on another database, running a soft check on their public credit filings, credit card debt, missed payments, maxed out limits. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the laptop reflecting in my eyes. The truth hit me like a bucket of ice water. They were completely broke. The perfect house, the expensive candles, the polished SUV, it was all a lie held together by extreme debt. They couldn't finance a car for Leo because no bank in the state would lend them a single dollar. Their credit was completely destroyed. They were drowning. They didn't steal my money just to spoil Leo. They stole it because I was the only person in the family who actually had any real cash. A cold, sharp focus settled over my mind. They thought I was just a quiet, weak girl who would cry, complain, and eventually accept it to keep the peace. They thought their secret was safe behind the closed doors of their expensive, unpaid house. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I saved the tax lien documents. I saved the property deed history. I printed physical copies on my small desk printer, listening to the machine grind and push out the warm pages of paper. I placed the documents neatly into a plain brown manila folder. I didn't have my money anymore, but I now had something much more dangerous. I had the truth. December 18th, 2016. Exactly 1 month and 4 days after my mother walked into the bank and took my future. I was sitting in my freezing apartment, eating a bowl of plain oatmeal for dinner. The heater was still broken. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was an unknown number, but I had a strange feeling in my stomach, so I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. I tapped the screen and pressed play. It was Aunt Martha. Her voice was shaking, and she was speaking very fast. "Clara, please pick up. I know you blocked my other number. It's about Leo. He was in a terrible accident last night. It was raining, and he was speeding on the highway. He lost control and hit a concrete barrier. He is physically fine, thank God, just some bruises. But Clara, the Mustang is completely destroyed. It's scrap metal. The insurance company is refusing to pay out the full amount because the police report says he was driving recklessly. Your father is furious. Your mother won't stop crying. They have no way to pay the dealership loan difference. Please, Clara, they need you right now. Call me." The voicemail ended. The room was completely silent except for the rain hitting the window. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel the urge to rush to the hospital to comfort my brother. I just felt empty. $42,500. 4 years of working 60 hours a week. 4 years of freezing in this apartment. All of it was gone, crushed into a ball of blue metal on a wet highway in less than 35 days. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't call back. By March of 2017, the quiet pain inside me had hardened into a cold, sharp focus. I realized that my $48,000 salary at the freight company was not going to save me. If I wanted to buy a house and completely secure my life, I needed to move faster. I needed to become undeniable. I applied for a job as a financial estimator at a large commercial construction firm in downtown Portland called Vanguard Contracting. The day of my interview, I walked into a busy, dusty office that smelled like fresh lumber, old blueprints, and strong black coffee. The owner of the company, Arthur Vance, did the interview himself. He was 58 years old, with rough, calloused hands and a face full of deep wrinkles. He didn't wear a suit. He wore heavy work boots and a flannel shirt. Arthur didn't ask me silly questions about my weaknesses or my 5-year plan. He dropped a thick, messy folder of a building budget on the table in front of me. "My current guy says this project will cost us $400,000 to build," Arthur said, his voice rough like sandpaper. "I think he's wrong. You have 15 minutes. Tell me what you see." I opened the folder. My brain immediately locked into the numbers. I tracked the material costs, the labor hours, and the supplier taxes. In 12 minutes, I circled a section on page 4 with my red pen. "Your guy missed the local permit fees for heavy machinery, and he calculated the drywall costs using last year's prices," I said, looking directly into Arthur's eyes. "This project won't cost you $400,000. It will cost you $422,000. If you bid using his numbers, you will lose $22,000. Arthur stared at the paper. Then he looked at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "You're hired. he said. Starting salary is $65,000. Show up on Monday at 7 a.m. Don't be late. That was the beginning of my real life. Over the next 3 years, Arthur became the father I never had. He didn't care about looking perfect. He didn't care about fake social status. He only cared about hard work, honesty, and results. When I did something great, he praised me in front of the whole office. When I made a mistake, he didn't scream or humiliate me. He sat down, explained the problem, and taught me how to fix it. I absorbed everything. I didn't just do the finances anymore. I learned how supply chains worked. I learned how to negotiate with massive steel suppliers. I learned the legal realities of construction contracts. Because of Arthur, my confidence grew, not from empty praises, but from actual, real-world skills. By October of 2019, I was 27 years old. My salary at Vanguard was now $90,000 a year, and finally, on a crisp Tuesday morning, I walked into a real estate office and signed the papers for my very own 3-bedroom townhouse in Hillsborough. The first night in my new house, the heating worked perfectly. I sat on my new sofa, drinking a glass of sparkling water, feeling a deep, quiet peace. I wasn't alone anymore either. At Vanguard, I had met Elena. She was the company's corporate lawyer. She was 30 years old, fiercely intelligent, and completely loyal. We ate lunch together every day. She was the sister I always needed. That Friday evening, Elena came over to my new house with 2 boxes of pizza to celebrate. We sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes. We were laughing and talking, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe enough to tell someone the truth. I told her everything: the stolen money, the Mustang, the crash, the voicemail, and the county tax lien I had found years ago showing my parents were secretly broke. Elena stopped chewing her pizza. Her dark eyes grew serious. She wiped her hands on a napkin, reached into her work bag, and pulled out her laptop. "Clara," Elena said, her voice dropping into her professional lawyer tone, "people who steal from their own children don't just stop at one theft. Let me look them up on my legal database. I have access to private financial filings that don't show up on a normal Google search." I hesitated, feeling a sudden knot in my stomach. "Are you sure? It's been 3 years. I haven't spoken a single word to them." "I'm sure," she said, typing rapidly. "I just want to make sure you are safe." She entered my father's and mother's names into the system. The screen loaded. We sat in silence for a few minutes as Elena scrolled through pages of legal text. Suddenly she stopped. She took a sharp breath. "What is it?" I asked, leaning closer to the screen. "Your father didn't retire from his regional manager job, Clara," Elena said softly, pointing at a public civil court record. "He was fired. The company caught him misusing corporate funds to pay off personal credit cards. They filed a civil lawsuit against him, but the public record shows the case was dropped because he agreed to surrender his entire pension to cover the stolen amount. That's why they have no money." I stared at the screen. The perfect, respectable family man. It was all a mask. "But it gets worse," Elena continued, clicking on another file. "Clara, look at this date. February 2017, 3 months after you left." She opened a denied credit report. It was an application for a platinum credit card with a $20,000 limit. "There is a hard inquiry on your credit file," Elena said, looking at me with sad, angry eyes. "Someone used your social security number to apply for this card, but they listed your parents' Lake Oswego address for the physical card delivery. The only reason it was denied is because you put a strict fraud lock on your credit profile the day you closed that bank account." I sat back against the sofa. The room felt very quiet. They didn't just make a mistake. They didn't just favor my brother. They were actively predatory. They were willing to destroy my financial identity, ruin my entire future, just to keep pretending they were rich. "Clara," Elena whispered, putting her hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do? I can draft a cease and desist letter. We can file a police report for identity theft." I looked at the glowing screen. The scared, lonely girl who cried over her stolen money was completely gone. In her place was a woman who understood contracts, liabilities, and leverage. "No," I said, my voice completely steady and cold. "We don't warn them. We let them think they got away with it. People like that eventually destroy themselves. We just sit back and watch." 7 years passed. The calendar on my large oak desk read May 4th, 2026. I was 33 years old. I was sitting in my corner office on the top floor of the Vanguard contracting building in downtown Portland. The huge glass windows looked out over the busy city streets. I wore a tailored black suit and a simple silver watch. A lot changes in 7 years when you stop waiting for people to love you and start working on yourself. In 2024, Arthur Vance started having heart problems. His doctor told him to stop working immediately. Arthur didn't have any kids. He looked at me, the quiet girl he hired years ago, and saw the person who built his profit margins up by 40%. He sold me 60% of Vanguard Contracting. I didn't just work there anymore. I was the managing partner. I was the boss. I had over 200 people working under me, and the company handled $25 million in construction contracts every year. At 9 a.m., my office door opened. Elena walked in. She was now the head of legal for Vanguard. She was wearing a sharp blue dress, holding a thick white binder, and 2 cups of hot black coffee. "Good morning, boss," Elena smiled, placing a coffee cup on my desk. "The final papers for the Pearl District Retail Hub just came through." "Good," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. The Pearl District project was massive. It was a $15 million contract to build a luxury outdoor shopping center. Our client was a large, aggressive real estate development firm called Apex Property Group. Elena didn't sit down in the chair across from me. She just stood there. Her smile slowly faded. She looked down at the white binder in her hands, then looked back at me. Her dark eyes were completely serious. "Clara," Elena said quietly. Her voice lost its usual bright energy. "I was just reviewing Apex's management team for the project. They sent over the contact sheet for the people who will be reporting to us on the construction site." "Okay. Is there a problem with their paperwork?" I asked, opening a silver pen to sign the documents. Elena slid the binder across my smooth wooden desk. It stopped right in front of my hands. She pointed a finger at the second page. "Look at the name of their new junior site coordinator," she said. I looked down. The paper was crisp and white. Printed in plain black ink under the Apex Property Group logo was a name: Leo Hayes, NAS Junior Site Coordinator. Email: lhayes@Apex Property. The office was so quiet I could hear the faint sound of cars honking down on the street. I stared at the name. Leo, my little brother, the golden child, the boy who crashed my house money into a concrete wall 10 years ago. I felt a strange physical reaction. 10 years ago, seeing his name would have made my stomach twist with pain, anger, or sadness. But today, sitting in my heavy leather chair, surrounded by the walls I built with my own blood and sweat, I felt absolutely nothing, just a cold, flat calm. "How long has he worked for them?" I asked, my voice completely steady. 3 months, Elena said, crossing her arms. "I did a quick background check this morning as soon as I saw the name. Clara, he has been jumping from job to job for the last 10 years. Low-level sales, gym manager, car salesman. This is his first corporate job. Apex hired him to just carry papers around the site and report back to us." I closed the binder. Elena leaned forward, putting her hands on my desk. "Clara, I can end this right now. I can email Apex's vice president. I can tell them we refuse to work with Leo Hayes due to a personal conflict of interest. They will pull him off this project in 5 minutes. You never have to look at his face." I looked out the window at the gray Portland sky. If I removed him, he would just go back to my parents, crying about how unfair the world was. They would comfort him. They would tell him he was a victim, and they would never know that the person who held his entire career in her hands was the sister they threw away. "No," I said softly, turning my chair to face Elena. "We are not dropping him. We signed a contract to manage this project. We do the job." "Clara, are you sure?" Elena asked, her eyes full of protective worry. "If he sees you..." "He thinks he is coming to meet Vanguard Contracting," I explained, leaning back in my chair. "He doesn't know Arthur retired. He doesn't know I own the firm. To him I am just the sister who disappeared 10 years ago. Let him come." Elena watched my face for a few seconds. She saw that I wasn't shaking. I wasn't scared. I was completely in control. Slowly she nodded. "Okay," Elena said, picking up her coffee. "The kickoff meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m., in our main boardroom. He is coming with his boss, the senior director of Apex." "Perfect," I said. "Send out the calendar invites." "But Elena..." "Yes? Make sure the legal file on my parents is updated," I said quietly, looking at the silver pen in my hand. "The unpaid taxes, the identity theft attempt from 2017, all of it. Make sure the papers are ready and printed." Elena's eyes sharpened. She understood exactly what I was doing. Step 3 and Step 4 were finally coming together. The secret and the rebuilding were about to collide. "I'll have the file ready by the end of the day," she said. She turned around and walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind her. I sat alone in the quiet room. I opened my laptop and checked my personal bank account, just out of habit. The screen loaded instantly. Available balance, $1,450,200 and thence. I didn't smile. Money didn't mean safety to me anymore. Power meant safety. And tomorrow morning, my brother was going to walk into my building, sit at my table, and realize exactly who had the power now. I closed the laptop. I was ready. Tuesday morning, May 5, 2026, 9:55 a.m. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table in Vanguard's main boardroom. The room was freezing, the air conditioning blowing quietly from the ceiling vents. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, I could see my employees walking around the busy office floor, holding coffee cups and blueprints. Elena sat in the chair to my right. She placed her laptop on the table, along with the plain brown manila folder containing my parents' financial secrets. She didn't say a word. She just gave me a single, solid nod. At exactly 10 a.m., the heavy glass door of the boardroom opened. My receptionist, Sarah, stepped inside with a bright professional smile. "Miss Hayes, the team from Apex Property Group is here." "Send them in, Sarah. Thank you," I said smoothly. Two men walked into the room. The first was an older man in a sharp gray suit, carrying an expensive leather briefcase. He walked with the heavy confidence of a man who was used to giving orders. This was Marcus Harrison, the senior director of Apex. Behind him, struggling slightly to hold two large rolls of blueprints and a stack of coffee cups in a cardboard tray, was the junior site coordinator. It was Leo. He looked different, but also exactly the same. He was 32 now. His hairline had moved back a little, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing a cheap blue suit that didn't fit him perfectly around the shoulders. He was looking down at the coffee cups, trying not to spill them, completely unaware of who was sitting at the head of the table. "Good morning," Marcus Harrison said loudly, walking toward me with his hand extended. "Marcus Harrison, it is a pleasure to finally meet the famous managing partner of Vanguard. I've heard great things about how you run this ship." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my black jacket and shook his hand firmly. "Clara Hayes, the pleasure is mine, Marcus. Please, take a seat." Behind Marcus, Leo froze. The cardboard drink tray in his hands tilted. A splash of hot coffee spilled over the plastic lids and dripped onto his knuckles. He didn't even flinch from the heat. His head snapped up. His eyes locked onto my face. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and sick. He stared at me, then looked around the massive, expensive boardroom, then looked back at me. His brain was desperately trying to process how his quiet, invisible sister was standing at the head of a $25 million contracting firm. "Ah, and this is my junior coordinator," Marcus said, turning around and frowning at the spilled coffee. "Leo, clean that up and put the blueprints on the table. Don't just stand there." Leo blinked rapidly. He stumbled forward, his hands shaking as he put the tray down. He wiped his wet hand on his suit pants. "Clara?" he whispered. His voice was small, almost like a frightened child's. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I looked at him with the exact same blank, polite expression I used for delivery drivers and strangers in elevators. "It is Miss Hayes in this building," I said clearly, my voice ringing through the quiet room. "Please take a seat, Mr. Hayes. We have a lot of ground to cover today." Leo swallowed hard. He pulled out a chair next to Marcus and sat down slowly. He couldn't take his eyes off me. For the next 45 minutes, I completely ignored the shared blood in our veins. I ran the meeting with pure, ruthless efficiency. I spoke directly to Marcus, breaking down the budget, the supply chain delays, and the legal permits needed for the Pearl District project. Whenever I did address Leo, it was strictly about his failures. "Mr. Hayes," I said, pointing my silver pen at a document on the table, "your timeline for the concrete pouring on page 4 is off by 3 days. You failed to account for the city's weekend noise restrictions. If we follow your schedule, the city will fine us $10,000. Leo wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. I'm sorry, Miss Hayes. I didn't know about the weekend rule. I can fix it." "See that you do. Send the corrected file to my legal department by 5 p.m. today," I replied coldly, turning my attention back to Marcus. When the meeting finally ended, Marcus stood up and shook my hand again. "Excellent meeting, Clara. I feel very confident having Vanguard on this project. Leo, pack up the files. I have a lunch meeting across town, so I'll see you back at the office." "Yes, sir," Leo muttered, quickly gathering the papers. Marcus walked out of the boardroom. The glass door clicked shut. Suddenly, the room felt very small. Elena stayed in her seat next to me, her hands resting quietly on her laptop. I stood at the head of the table, organizing my notes. Leo stopped packing his bag. He looked at the closed door, then turned to face me. The nervous, shaking junior employee was gone. Suddenly his posture changed. He stood up a little straighter. A familiar, manipulative look crossed his face, the look of a boy who was used to getting exactly what he wanted from his family. "Clara," Leo said, letting out a heavy breath and forcing a small, awkward laugh. Wow. Look at you, the big boss. Mom and Dad are not going to believe this when I tell them. I didn't look up from my papers. There is nothing to tell, Mr. Hayes. We are vendors. You are a client. That is the only relationship that exists in this room. Leo took a step closer to the table. His voice dropped into a soft, complaining tone. Come on, Clara. Don't be like that. It's been 10 years. You just disappeared. Aunt Martha was worried sick. Dad was so angry when you blocked everyone's numbers over a stupid misunderstanding. We're family. You can't hold a grudge forever. I slowly placed my pen down on the table. I looked up and met his eyes. A stupid misunderstanding. That was what they called stealing 4 years of my life. In his mind, he was still the hero, and I was just the angry sister making a big deal out of nothing. Family, I repeated quietly. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I reached across the desk and picked up the plain brown manila folder Elena had prepared. I didn't open it. I just slid it slowly across the smooth mahogany wood until it stopped right in front of Leo's hands. What is this? Leo asked, looking down at the folder. That is a public property tax record from Clackamas County, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. It shows a $60,000 tax lien on a house in Lake Oswego. Behind it is a bank record from February 2017, showing a rejected credit card application in my name. The application specifically listed your parents' address for the physical card delivery. Leo physically stepped back from the table. His eyes went wide. The fake, confident smile completely vanished from his face. You see, Leo, I continued, leaning slightly over the table. I didn't disappear because I was throwing a tantrum. I disappeared because I realized I was sitting at a table with thieves who were completely broke. Clara, wait, I didn't… Leo stuttered, holding his hands up defensively. Don't speak, I commanded. The sharpness in my voice made him snap his mouth shut. You will leave my building. You will go back to your desk. You will not call me. You will not tell Robert or Susan that you saw me. If any of you ever try to contact me outside of this specific construction contract, my head of legal, I gestured slightly to Elena, who stared at him with cold, dead eyes, will forward that entire folder to the Portland Police Department for felony identity theft. Leo looked at Elena, then back at me. He was trembling. For the first time in his entire life, the protective bubble my parents built around him popped. He was standing in the real world, facing a woman he could not manipulate, cry to, or control. I need that concrete schedule by 5 p.m., Mr. Hayes, I said, turning my back to him and walking toward my office door. Don't be late. The moment the heavy glass door clicked shut behind Leo, the cold, rigid posture I had forced myself to hold completely collapsed. I sank back into my leather chair. My lungs burned as I let out a long, shaky breath I didn't realize I was holding. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. I wasn't a robot. For 10 years I had built walls around my heart. But seeing his face, hearing that same whining tone, it brought back the smell of that roasted chicken and the cold rain of my old apartment. Elena didn't say a word. She didn't offer empty platitudes like, you did great, or don't let him get to you. She knew real trauma didn't work like that. Instead, she walked over to the small cabinet in the corner of the boardroom. I heard the clinking of glass. She walked back and placed a glass of ice water directly into my trembling hand. Then, she pulled up a chair, sat right next to me, and simply waited in silence while I took a slow sip. The freezing water grounded me, bringing me back to the present. Thank you, I whispered, the shaking in my hands finally stopping. Anytime, Elena said softly. She opened her laptop. I am putting a permanent security flag on your name at the front desk. If anyone named Robert or Susan Hayes tries to enter this building, security will escort them out immediately. You are safe here, Clara. This is your house now. I looked at Elena. This was what real family looked like. It wasn't about shared DNA. It was about who stood next to you when the ground started shaking, actively helping you hold the walls up. Over the next 4 weeks, the Pearl District Retail Hub project moved into the heavy construction phase. The reality of working a real job began to crush Leo. On a hot Tuesday afternoon, June 9, 2026, I drove my company truck to the construction site for a surprise inspection. The site was loud, smelling heavily of wet dirt, diesel fuel, and drying concrete. I wore a white hard hat, a bright yellow safety vest, and heavy steel-toed boots. I found Leo standing near a massive pile of steel pipes, looking completely lost. His face was sunburned, and his expensive clothes were ruined by gray dust. He was holding a clipboard, staring at a team of union workers who were waiting for his instructions. I walked up behind him. "Mr. Hayes, why is the welding team sitting down?" Leo jumped, dropping his pen in the dirt. He scrambled to pick it up, his face turning red. "Miss Hayes, the steel supplier delivered the wrong grade of pipes. I was just trying to call them to get it fixed." "Show me the delivery manifest," I said, holding out my hand. He nervously handed me the clipboard. I looked at the paper for 3 seconds. "The supplier didn't send the wrong pipes, Mr. Hayes. You signed the wrong order code last Thursday. You ordered grade C instead of grade A." It was a typo," Leo stammered, looking around to see if the workers were listening. "I can just return them." "You can't return custom-cut steel," I said, my voice completely flat, easily cutting through the noise of a distant bulldozer. "This mistake just cost your company $18,000. Call Marcus Harrison immediately. Tell him what you did, and tell him to wire the replacement funds to our account by tomorrow morning, or we halt construction." "Clara, please," Leo whispered, his eyes wide with panic. "If I tell Marcus I lost $18,000, he will fire me. This is my first real chance. Can't you just hide the cost in Vanguard's budget, just this once, for me?" I stared at him. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. He still thought the world was a high school drama where mommy and daddy could just pay the teacher to change his failing grade. "I am not your mother," I said coldly. "I do not pay for your mistakes. Call your boss, or I will." I turned around and walked away, my steel-toed boots crunching loudly on the gravel. I didn't look back, but toxic families do not surrender that easily. When a parasite loses its host, it doesn't just walk away, it gets desperate. 3 days later, on Friday, June 12th, I was sitting in my office when Elena walked in. She wasn't holding legal files today. She was holding a thick, expensive cream-colored envelope. Her face was set in a hard, angry line. "This just arrived at the front desk via private courier," Elena said, dropping the envelope on my desk. "It's addressed to you. The return address is Lake Oswego." I stared at the envelope. Leo had broken the rule. He had run home to his parents and told them everything. I picked up my silver letter opener, sliced the heavy paper, and pulled out a beautifully printed card with gold lettering. A smaller, handwritten note fell out onto my desk. I picked up the handwritten note. It was my mother's elegant cursive handwriting. "My dearest Clara, Leo told us the wonderful news about your success. Your father and I cried tears of joy. We always knew you were destined for greatness. It has been 10 long years, and we have missed our little girl every single day. We are hosting a grand 40th wedding anniversary gala next Saturday at the Lake Oswego Country Club. All our friends and extended family will be there. We have reserved the seat of honor right next to us for you. Please come home, sweetie. Let's put silly past misunderstandings behind us and be a family again. We have so much to celebrate. With all our love, Mom and Dad." I read the letter twice. My stomach turned with disgust. There was no apology. No mention of the $42,500 they stole. No mention of the credit card fraud. Just a smooth, manipulative lie designed to pull me back into their web. Elena picked up the main printed invitation card. "Lake Oswego Country Club," she read aloud. Then, she opened her laptop and quickly typed something. A few seconds later, she let out a dark, humorless laugh. "What?" I asked. "Clara, the secret is deeper than we thought," Elena said, turning her screen toward me. "I just ran a soft inquiry on the country club's public event registry. They only put down a small $5,000 deposit. They haven't paid the catering or the rest of the venue fee. They used their old reputation to convince the manager that a bank wire was delayed over the weekend. The final payment of $25,000 is due the night of the party." I stared at the screen. Slowly, the entire puzzle clicked together in my mind. They weren't inviting me because they loved me. They were inviting me because they were completely bankrupt. They were throwing a massive, expensive party they couldn't afford to keep up their fake image in front of their rich friends. They found out I was a millionaire, and they were planning to corner me at the party, in front of 100 people, and use public pressure and emotional manipulation to force me to pay the bill. "It's a trap," I said quietly. "A very desperate one," Elena agreed, closing her laptop. "I'll throw the invitation in the shredder. Security is already on high alert if they try to come here." I looked at the gold lettering on the invitation. For 10 years I had run away. I had hidden in the shadows, building my armor. But they were still out there, wearing their masks, believing they could still control me. Step 4 was over. It was time for step 5. "No," I said, picking up the invitation. "Don't shred it." Elena looked at me, surprised. Clara, you can't be serious. You are not going into that snake pit alone. I am not going alone, I said, looking up at her. I am bringing my corporate lawyer, and I am bringing the brown manila folder. I stood up and walked over to the large glass window, looking down at the city I had conquered. They want a public family gathering, I said, my voice completely cold and steady. They want to play happy family in front of their friends. Fine, I will give them exactly what they want. But this time, I am bringing the truth. Saturday, June 20, 2026, 6:30 p.m. I stood in front of the mirror in my Hillsborough house. I was not dressing for a family party. I was dressing for a business negotiation. I chose a tailored navy blue suit and flat black shoes. No expensive jewelry, no bright colors. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman who owned a company, who dealt with facts, and who could not be manipulated. Elena was waiting in my living room. She wore a sharp gray blazer and held the plain brown manila folder tight against her chest. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. We got into my heavy company SUV and drove toward Lake Oswego. The sky was dark, and a light summer rain was falling, blurring the streetlights. My chest felt tight, but it wasn't fear. It was the heavy, pulling feeling of a storm about to break. For 10 years, my parents had controlled the narrative. Tonight, the silence was going to end. We pulled into the Lake Oswego Country Club at 7:15 p.m. The parking lot was packed with shiny Mercedes, BMWs, and Range Rovers. The valet took my keys. We walked up the wide stone steps and pushed open the heavy glass doors. The grand ballroom was massive and bright. Huge crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden light over the room. A live string quartet was playing soft classical music in the corner. The air smelled of expensive roasted beef, spilled champagne, and heavy perfumes. There were about 80 people in the room, wealthy neighbors, old friends of the family, and relatives I hadn't seen in a decade. At the back of the room, a massive silk banner hung over the main table. It read, "Happy 40th anniversary, Robert and Susan." Everything looked perfect. It looked like the celebration of a deeply successful, happy family. But I knew the truth. I knew the caterers waiting in the kitchen hadn't been paid yet. The entire room was a beautiful, expensive lie. Elena and I stepped into the ballroom. For a moment, nobody noticed us. Then, I saw Uncle Dave by the bar. He stopped mid-drink, his eyes going wide. He tapped his wife's arm. Slowly, like a wave moving across a lake, people started to turn their heads. The music kept playing, but the loud chatter in the room dropped to a low, buzzing whisper. The prodigal daughter had returned. Before I could take 10 steps into the room, a woman rushed toward me, pushing through the crowd. It was Aunt Martha. She wore a bright pink dress, and she looked terrified. "Clara," she whispered loudly, grabbing my arm with shaking hands. She smelled like strong floral perfume and cheap wine. "You actually came. Oh, thank goodness." I gently pulled my arm out of her grip. "Hello, Aunt Martha." Martha looked at my dark suit, then looked at Elena, who was standing right next to me holding the thick brown folder. Martha's eyes darted around the room nervously. "Clara, listen to me," Martha said, stepping closer to block my path. Her voice was trembling. "Your parents are so happy tonight. Everyone is looking. Please, I know you are still upset about the past, but let's just have a peaceful night. Just smile, take some pictures for the family album, and eat your dinner. Don't make a scene. Keep the peace, sweetie, for the family." I looked down at her. She was exactly the same, the ultimate enabler. She knew my parents stole my money. She knew they tried to steal my identity. But to her, a quiet lie was always better than an ugly truth. "I am not here to take pictures, Martha," I said softly, my voice completely calm. "And there is no peace left to keep." Martha's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to argue, but a sudden noise cut her off. Someone was tapping a silver spoon against a crystal glass. Clink, clink, clink. The room went completely silent. The string quartet stopped playing. The crowd slowly parted down the middle, creating a clear walkway. At the end of the walkway stood my parents. My mother, Susan, was wearing a stunning floor-length silver gown that sparkled under the chandeliers. My father, Robert, wore a sharp black tuxedo. They looked like movie stars. They looked like the perfect wealthy couple. Standing a few feet behind them was Leo. He was wearing his cheap blue suit from work. When he saw me, he physically took a step backward and looked down at his shoes, refusing to make eye contact. My mother raised her hands to her mouth, putting on a flawless performance of a shocked, overjoyed mother. "Clara," Susan gasped. Her voice echoed loudly in the quiet room so every single guest could hear her. "My beautiful girl, you came home." She started walking toward me quickly, her arms spread wide open for a hug. The crowd watched with soft, approving smiles. This was the trap. If I hugged her, I surrendered. I accepted my role in their fake play. If I screamed or yelled, I would look like a crazy, ungrateful daughter ruining her parents' beautiful anniversary, and they would play the victims. Susan was 5 feet away, 4 feet. Her arms were reaching for my shoulders, tears of fake joy shining in her eyes. I didn't yell. I didn't get angry. I simply took one calm, deliberate step to the left. My mother's hands grabbed empty air. She stumbled slightly, her silver dress swishing awkwardly. She caught her balance and turned to look at me, her fake smile cracking just a fraction of an inch. The entire ballroom gasped. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. My father's face instantly darkened. The warm, happy grandfather mask vanished. He marched down the walkway, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a cold, familiar anger. He stopped right in front of me. "Clara," Robert commanded, his voice low and dangerous, a tone meant only for my ears. "Give your mother a hug right now. Do not embarrass us in front of these people." I looked directly into his eyes. I didn't look down, I didn't shake. "I am not a child anymore, Robert," I said, my voice clear and steady enough for the front row of guests to hear. "I don't take orders from thieves." The tension in the room snapped like a broken wire. The public confrontation had officially begun. My father's fake smile completely melted away. For a second the mask slipped, and I saw the real Robert Hayes, the angry, controlling man who terrified this family into silence for 30 years. But he was a master of the room. He quickly caught himself. He forced a loud, booming laugh that echoed off the high ceiling. "Ah, Clara," Robert announced to the crowd, waving his hand as if I had just told a silly joke. "Always the dramatic one. She has had a rough week at work, everyone. Please go back to your drinks. The food will be out shortly." A few people awkwardly smiled and turned around, picking up their champagne glasses. The string quartet slowly picked up their instruments, unsure if they should start playing again. Robert stepped dangerously close to me. His face was only inches from mine. I could smell his strong cologne mixed with the sharp scent of his nervous sweat. "I don't know what game you are playing," he hissed, his voice a vicious whisper. "But you will turn around, walk out that door, and wait by the car. I will deal with you when this party is over." "I'm not going anywhere," I said smoothly. My voice was calm, but loud enough to cut through the quiet murmurs of the crowd. "You invited me here, Robert. You wanted a public reunion. Let's have it." Susan stepped forward. The fake joy was gone from her face. She realized the trap wasn't working. So, she switched to her second weapon, becoming the ultimate victim. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Her bottom lip started to tremble. "Clara, why are you doing this?" she cried loudly. "We just wanted our daughter back. We paid for this beautiful night to celebrate our family, and you come here to ruin it. What is wrong with you?" Aunt Martha rushed forward again, standing next to my mother. She looked at me with angry, disappointed eyes. "Clara, stop it right now. Look at your mother. She is crying. They spent thousands of dollars to bring this family together tonight. Have some respect." I looked at Martha. Then I looked at the crowd. 80 pairs of eyes were staring at me, judging me. To them I was a cruel, angry child breaking my sweet mother's heart. "They didn't pay for anything, Martha," I said clearly. The room went dead silent again. The violin player lowered his bow. "What are you talking about?" Martha asked, blinking in confusion. I turned slightly and held out my hand. Elena stepped forward. She didn't smile. She opened the thick brown manila folder and handed me a single sheet of paper. The thick paper made a sharp, dry sound in the quiet room. "The caterers in the kitchen haven't been paid," I said, holding the paper up. "The country club hasn't been paid. The final bill for this party is $25,000. My parents invited me here tonight because they found out I own a successful company. They plan to use all of you, this entire crowd, to guilt me into paying the bill before the night was over." "That is a lie," Robert shouted. His face turned a deep, dark red. The veins in his neck stood out. "Don't listen to her. She is sick in the head." "Is it a lie?" I asked, looking directly at my father. I didn't raise my voice. The calmer I was, the crazier he looked. "Did you also lie when you walked into Oregon Community Bank 10 years ago and withdrew $42,500 from my savings account?" A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Uncle Dave, my father's oldest brother, stepped out from the crowd. He looked shocked. "Rob, what is she talking about?" "It was family money," Robert yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. He was losing control. The real man was finally spilling out for everyone to see. "I put a roof over your head. I fed you. You were living alone in a cheap apartment. Your brother needed a car to get a job. I am the head of this family, and I decide where the money goes. You are a selfish, greedy little girl." He believed it. He truly believed that giving me basic food and shelter as a child meant he owned my entire life. "You didn't buy him a car because you were being a good father," I said, my voice dropping to a hard, cold tone. I reached out, and Elena handed me 3 more pages. "You bought him a car using my money because you were completely bankrupt." Susan let out a loud sob, covering her face with her hands. "Please, Clara, stop. Everyone is watching." "Let them watch," I said. I turned to Uncle Dave and handed him the papers. Uncle Dave put on his reading glasses. His hands shook slightly as he looked at the official documents. 3 years before you stole my money," I announced to the silent room, "Robert was fired from his job as a regional manager for embezzling corporate funds. He lost his entire pension to avoid going to jail." "Rob?" Uncle Dave whispered, looking up from the papers. "Is this true? You told us you retired early." Robert couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed. The polished, successful businessman image was shattering into a million pieces right on the country club floor. "But taking my savings wasn't enough," I continued, staring at my mother now. "You blew through my $42,000 in a month when Leo crashed the Mustang. So, you got desperate." I looked back at Uncle Dave. "Turn to the last page, Dave." Dave flipped the paper. His eyes went wide. "In February 2017, I said, my voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "My mother used my social security number to apply for a $20,000 credit card in my name. She filled out the application and listed her own house as the delivery address. You didn't just steal my past. You tried to steal my future." Aunt Martha put her hand over her mouth. She backed away from Susan as if my mother had a contagious disease. The enablers were finally waking up. The silent rule of keeping the peace was dead because the facts were too loud to ignore. "You ungrateful brat." Robert suddenly roared. He lunged forward, his heavy hands reaching for my shoulders. He wanted to physically shake me. He wanted to use fear to silence me one last time. Before he could touch me, Elena stepped smoothly between us. She didn't push him, but she stood her ground, looking at him with dead, cold eyes. "If you touch her, Robert," Elena said, her voice dripping with pure legal threat, "I will have you arrested for assault before the appetizers are served. And tomorrow morning I will hand these identity theft files directly to the district attorney. Sit down." Robert froze. He looked at Elena's sharp suit. He looked at the heavy manila folder. For the first time in his life, he realized he had 0 power. The fear he used to control his family meant absolutely nothing in the real world. He slowly lowered his hands, breathing heavily, looking like a tired, broken old man. I looked past him and saw Leo. My brother was trying to slowly walk backward into the crowd, trying to escape the room before anyone noticed him. "Don't leave yet, Leo," I called out. Leo froze. 80 people turned to look at him. "You wanted to know how I became the big boss," I said softly. "I became the boss because while you were crashing sports cars and letting mommy and daddy clean up your messes, I was working, and now you work for Apex Property Group, a company that hired my firm." Leo closed his eyes, his face burning red with deep public shame. I looked at the 3 of them, my father, my mother, and my brother, the toxic triangle. They stood in the middle of the grand, expensive ballroom, completely exposed. There was no more fake money, no more fake respect. "I didn't come here tonight to be part of your family," I said quietly, looking at my mother's tear-stained face. "I came here to make sure you never, ever try to contact me again." Uncle Dave didn't yell. He didn't throw a punch. He just carefully folded the 3 pieces of paper, placed them gently on the nearest small cocktail table, and took a slow step back. He looked at his younger brother. 30 years, Rob," Dave said. His voice was not angry. It was thick with a quiet, heavy disappointment that echoed loudly in the silent room. "You sat at my dinner table every Thanksgiving. You judged my kids for taking student loans. You acted like you were better, smarter, and richer than all of us. And you were stealing money from your own daughter's bank account to pay for a sports car." Dave turned to his wife, Helen, who was staring at the floor in complete shock. "Get your coat, Helen. We are going home." That was the breaking point. The invisible spell of fear and respect that my father had held over the family for decades simply snapped in half. When Uncle Dave, the oldest and most respected brother, turned his back and walked toward the coat check, the rest of the room followed his lead. People didn't make a big scene. They didn't scream or point fingers. They just quietly placed their crystal champagne glasses on the white tablecloths. The soft shuffling of expensive leather shoes on the polished hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. Aunt Martha walked past me without making eye contact, keeping her head down, rushing to the exit. They were all walking out. Suddenly, a tall man in a dark blue suit stepped out from the kitchen area. He had a small radio earpiece in his right ear and carried a black leather folder. "Mr. Hayes," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was incredibly polite, but his eyes were hard and serious. "I apologize for the interruption, but given the public nature of this conversation, my head office requires me to run the final payment card before we begin the dinner service. You promised the wire transfer delay was a simple bank error, but I cannot extend credit any further. The remaining balance is $25,000. Robert's face went completely pale. The angry dark red color vanished from his cheeks. He patted the pockets of his black tuxedo jacket, his hands shaking slightly. He looked around the room as if the money was going to magically fall from the crystal chandeliers. "Sterling, please," Robert whispered, completely dropping his aggressive, commanding tone. He sounded weak. "I am good for it. I have been a member here for 8 years, you know me. Let's just stick to our agreement. Let's just get through the dinner service. I will bring you a cashier's check on Monday morning." Mr. Sterling shook his head slowly. "I am sorry, sir. You are out of time. Our policy is very strict. If you cannot provide a working credit card right now, I have to instruct my staff to clear the tables." Robert looked at his wife. Susan was shaking her head, tears ruining her expensive makeup, leaving dark black lines on her cheeks. He looked at Leo, who was staring at his cheap shoes, trying to make himself invisible. Finally, Robert looked at me. For a split second, the old habit kicked in. He looked at me with desperate, begging eyes. Even after all the insults, the threats, and the theft, a tiny part of his brain still believed I was the weak little girl who would step forward, open my checkbook, and save him from public shame. He thought I still cared about the family name. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just looked at him with the exact same blank, polite expression I used when dealing with bad suppliers at work. "Not my party," I said quietly. Mr. Sterling nodded. He raised his hand and gave a sharp, silent signal toward the kitchen doors. Immediately, 12 waiters in crisp white shirts walked out. They didn't bring trays of roasted beef. They started picking up the empty plates, gathering the heavy silver forks, and folding the cloth napkins. They were packing up the party before it even started. The clinking sound of silverware being thrown into plastic bins filled the room. It was the worst shame possible for people who only cared about their social image. Their rich friends were leaving. The food was being taken away. Their fake picture of a perfect life was completely dead. Suddenly, Susan turned on Robert. The mask of the sweet, perfect wife fell off completely. "You told me you had the money," she screamed at him, her voice cracking loudly. "You said the bank approved the new loan. You made me invite all these people to look at us." "Me?" Robert yelled back, his face twisting with rage as he pointed a finger at her nose. "You are the one who needed a massive anniversary gala. You couldn't just have a quiet dinner. You had to show off to Martha and the neighbors. You stole her money. You got fired from your job," Susan cried out, pointing her finger at me but keeping her angry eyes locked on Robert. They were tearing each other apart right in the middle of the dance floor. In the real world, manipulators have no loyalty to anyone, not even to each other. When the ship finally sinks, they fight over the last life jacket. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a sudden rush of victory or happiness. I just felt a deep, heavy sadness. This was my family, a group of broken, empty people fighting over an unpaid bill in a rented, empty ballroom. I turned to Alana. "Let's go," I whispered. We turned around and started walking toward the heavy glass doors at the front entrance. "Clara, wait," I stopped. I didn't turn around. I just turned my head slightly to the side. It was Leo. He had finally moved from his safe spot behind his parents. He walked a few steps toward me, twisting his fingers together nervously. His shoulders were slumped. "Clara, please," Leo stammered, his voice shaking. I really need this job at Apex. Marcus is going to fire me if Vanguard drops me from the project. I don't have any money saved. I have rent to pay next week. You have to help me. I'm your brother." I finally turned to look at him completely. He wasn't apologizing for crashing the car. He wasn't sorry for the pain he caused me for 10 years. He was only scared for his own future. He still wanted me to fix his life. "You have a job, Mr. Hayes," I said, my voice completely flat and professional. "You have a desk. You have a schedule. Do the work properly, and you won't get fired. But if you ever try to use my name, or my company, to fix your mistakes again, I will personally make sure you never work in this city again." I didn't wait for his answer. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and walked out into the night. The rain had finally stopped. The cold, crisp air hit my face, smelling beautifully like wet pine trees and clean asphalt. I took a deep breath, My lungs filled with the freezing air, and for the first time in 10 years, the heavy, invisible weight on my chest was completely gone. I could breathe normally again. We walked across the wet parking lot to my company SUV. Elena unlocked the doors, and we climbed inside. The thick leather seats felt warm and safe. I pulled the heavy door shut, completely blocking out the faint sounds of the country club. Elena put the keys in the ignition and turned on the heater, but she didn't start the engine right away. She turned to look at me in the dim blue light of the dashboard. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I looked out the window. I could see Uncle Dave driving his car out of the parking lot. I could see the bright lights of the ballroom shining through the large windows, where my parents were still standing in the middle of an empty room, arguing with the manager. "I am," I said quietly, and it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. "Let's go home." 3 weeks passed. It was a warm Saturday morning in mid-July. The sun was shining brightly over my backyard in Hillsborough. I sat on my wooden porch, drinking a glass of cold iced tea. The neighborhood was quiet, filled only with the soft sound of sprinklers watering the green grass. My phone buzzed on the small glass table next to me. The screen lit up with a long text message from an unknown number. I picked it up and read the words on the screen. "Clara, please. The bank took the Lake Oswego house on Tuesday. They locked the doors. We had to pack our clothes in black garbage bags. We are staying at a cheap, dirty motel near the highway. Your father is having severe chest pains from the stress. He says he is so sorry for everything he said at the party. We have absolutely nothing left. Leo can't help us. Please, just call me. We need you." I stared at the glowing screen. 10 years ago, reading those words would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have rushed to my car, driven to that dark motel, and emptied my bank account to save them from their pain. But today, sitting in the quiet safety of my own home, I just felt a distant sadness. My father wasn't sorry because he suddenly realized stealing from his daughter was a terrible crime. He was sorry because his rich friends saw the truth, his brother walked away, and his fake kingdom had finally collapsed. If I paid for their motel room today, they would be demanding that I buy them a new luxury house tomorrow. The toxic cycle would never, ever end. I didn't type a reply. I didn't send an angry paragraph telling them how much they hurt me. I simply tapped the screen, selected block caller, and put the phone back down on the glass table. The boundary was finally closed. They made their choices 10 years ago, and now they had to live in the painful reality they created. On Monday morning, the routine of my real life continued at the Vanguard office. I was standing by the front reception desk, looking over some new building plans, when the heavy glass doors opened. It was Leo. He was dropping off the weekly safety logs for the Pearl District project. He looked completely different. The cheap, shiny blue suit was gone. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, heavy work boots, and a faded yellow safety vest. His face was sunburned, his hands were dirty, and he looked deeply exhausted. Marcus Harrison had clearly stopped treating him like a special assistant. He was forcing Leo to do the hard physical labor of walking the hot construction site every single day. Leo walked up to my receptionist, Sarah. He didn't look around the big office with wide, greedy eyes. He kept his head down. "Here are the safety logs from Apex," Leo said quietly, placing the thick folder on the desk. "Thank you. Have a good day." Sarah smiled politely. He turned around to leave. As he walked toward the door, he looked up and saw me standing by the hallway. He stopped. We looked at each other across the quiet lobby. There was no fake smile, no whining, no manipulation. For a second, I saw genuine heavy shame in his tired eyes. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't ask me to save him. He just gave me a slow, stiff nod, a sign of basic, distant respect. I gave him a single brief nod in return. He pushed the glass door open and walked out into the busy city street, heading back to his work truck to finish his long shift. He was finally learning how to survive in the real world, without anyone to carry his weight. I turned back to my blueprints, my mind completely clear. November 14th, 2026, exactly 10 years to the day since I sat in my freezing Beaverton apartment and realized my entire life savings had been stolen. The weather outside in Hillsborough was cold, a heavy winter rain beating against the thick glass of my windows. But inside my house, the world was completely different. The central heating hummed a quiet, steady rhythm, filling every corner of the room with a deep, comfortable warmth. I stood in my bright kitchen, pulling a heavy metal pan out of the oven. The rich, savory smell of roasted chicken, garlic, and fresh potatoes filled the air. I walked over and placed the hot pan in the center of my large dining table. There were no expensive candles trying to hide the smell of secrets. There was no nervous silence. There was no fear. Sitting at my table was Elena, pouring dark red wine into 3 glasses. Next to her sat Arthur Vance. He looked older now, his hair completely white, and he kept his wooden walking cane resting against his chair. But his eyes were just as sharp and kind as the morning he handed me that first construction budget. He was telling a loud, funny story about a terrible plumbing contractor from 20 years ago, and Elena was laughing so hard she had to cover her mouth. I walked over and sat down at the head of the table. Arthur stopped his story and looked at me. He picked up his wine glass. "To Clara," Arthur said, his rough sandpaper voice softening into true pride. "The smartest risk I ever took, the hardest worker in Portland, and the best partner a tired old builder could ever ask for." "To the boss," Elena agreed, smiling warmly and gently tapping her glass against his. I picked up my glass. The cool crystal felt solid and real in my hand. "To us," I whispered. As I served the food, I realized I was serving the exact same meal my mother had made on that terrible Sunday night 10 years ago. But this time, nobody told me to be quiet. Nobody told me to hide my success so someone else could feel better. When I spoke, Arthur and Elena truly listened. When I smiled, they smiled back. I looked at the empty space at the far end of the room. My parents weren't here. Somewhere out there, miles away in a damp, cheap motel, they were living the painful, bitter reality their own lies had built. The anger that had burned inside my chest for a decade was completely gone. The desperate, heavy grief of wishing my parents would just love me had quietly washed away. Looking at Arthur, who taught me how to survive in the business world, and Elena, who stood like a shield between me and my past, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place in my heart. The people who share your blood can break your heart, but they do not own your future. True loyalty isn't demanded through fear or guilt. It is earned through actions, honesty, and protection. These 2 people sitting in my kitchen didn't share my last name, but they were the truest family I had ever known. The rain continued to fall in the dark Oregon night outside, washing the city streets clean. Inside, the warm fire crackled in the living room, and the sound of real, honest laughter echoed through my home. I took a slow, deep breath, finally resting in the life I had built with my own 2 hands. DNA is just biology, but loyalty is a choice. Remember, you don't owe anyone your future, not even the people who raised you. If you've ever had to cut ties to save your own life, tell your story in the comments. I'm reading every single one.